pleased to have everybody here, and we're pleased to have folks from Brightline Virgin Trains here to take you through some information tonight. One quick housekeeping note. We are going to go through a presentation, and we ask that folks hold questions until the end. And just so that everybody in the room can hear everybody else's questions, if you could approach the mics that are here in the center aisle to ask your questions, that will help everybody hear everyone else, hopefully a little bit better than you were hearing me here at the beginning. So just to say a quick welcome, I'd like to now introduce Mayor Todd Wodraska.
You don't have to applaud. Thanks. Hey, good evening, everybody. We know that when it comes to anything to do with the trains, especially Brightline, as we're calling it now, it draws attention and it gets people excited to understand how it's going to affect our Jupiter quality of life. It's a great crowd, and we expected one. Let me introduce my colleagues on the Town Council. Vice Mayor Jim Koretsky is over here. Vice Mayor. Councilmember Ron Delaney is in the audience, and Councilmember Alon Coffer. So we're here. We're here to learn, just like you all. I saw Councilmember Carl Woods from Gardens here. Carl, where are you, buddy? I saw there you are, somewhere in the. He's kind of incognito in the middle, but he's from Palm Beach Gardens. And so we're all really interested to hear tonight, and much of the Town Council is going to hear information for the first time, like you all are tonight. The most important message that I want to send to you all tonight is we, as the elected officials in the community, are very interested to make sure to understand what's most important to you all, because any decisions. I mean, this is a tough one. You know, the FEC and the rail companies have much of the rights to go up and down on the rail and so forth. But what we're most interested in is trying to protect as well as we can our wonderful Jupiter quality of life, which is why everybody is attracted to this area. So thank you for coming tonight. We all look forward to hearing your questions, and we'll be taking close note. And then thanks to the Brightline folks for coming tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And now I'd like to turn it over to Rusty Roberts, who is with Brightline Virgin Trains.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, members of the council, for being here today. We really appreciate the invitation to come and brief residents of Jupiter and the surrounding areas on this really exciting project, exciting to me. My name is Rusty Roberts, and I'm a Vice President for Government Affairs for the company. I have been with Brightline since 2013, about a year after the project was announced, so 6.5 years, and I used to be a little taller, but I'm happy to be here and really bring you up to date on where we are with the project, how things are going to happen here in northern Palm Beach County in terms of construction, the river, and be happy to answer your questions. I think I'm going to start with a little video. This is a video that it's only 90 minutes long, so don't worry about that. It's a little video we created about a year ago. It's sort of a sales tool, but it's also an introductory to the product that we're operating south of here between Miami and West Palm Beach. Is there anybody in the room that's actually ridden Brightline? Thank you very much. For folks who haven't been able to ride Brightline yet, this little video will introduce you to the system. We'll also, throughout the evening, use the name, the brand, Brightline and Virgin Trains, different times. You'll see, maybe we'll say Brightline, maybe we'll say Virgin. Some of the stuff you will see on the slides say Virgin. This video was done when we were Brightline, and so we'll go there first, and if you want to roll that.
Say hello to the open track, to the freedom to move, to high-speed intercity rail service, to the first privately funded rail system in the U.S. in more than 100 years. Say hello to the business professionals, to the nightlifers, the dreamers, the adventurers. Say hello to the day trippers, to the last-minute field trips, to meaningful connections, to America's solution to traffic. downtown Miami to downtown Fort Lauderdale to downtown West Palm Beach in about 30 minutes each for less than the cost of driving. And soon, Orlando and Tampa. Say hello to all the luxuries and amenities of first-class travel. And the freedom to actually get where you need to go. To a dynamic energy. To people and places you care about. To transforming downtown real estate. Say hello to a formula that can be replicated across the country. Atlanta to Charlotte. Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio. Los Angeles to Vegas, Chicago to St. Louis, and say hello to the future of express intercity travel in America. Say hello to Brightline.
Thank you. If you want to cue up the slides, we can get started. So, as I said, we created that video about a year ago, and just before we started operations, we started carrying passengers revenue service in January of 2018. The initial operating segment was between West Palm Beach, between Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach. The Miami station was not open yet when we opened in January 2018. Miami opened in May of 2018, and then we slowly ramped up to what we've decided would be our maximum schedule of operations. That is 16 trains each way, each day. It's a little less on weekends, and we found during the week that we actually had more people riding during the rush hour, as you can imagine, commuters who are convenient to the station. So we've added a few trains in the morning, but generally it's 16 to 17 trains each way, so that's 32 to 34 trains between Miami and West Palm Beach. Since we started, we've had a steady, gradual ramp up of ridership. The business model is such that we need to grow the company like any brand new business. You start off and you work to grow the business. In June of this year, we carried our 1 millionth passenger, and we are continued to grow every month. We're expecting a very, very exciting winter season as the snowbirds come south, and with a lot of events going on now. The train has been operating a year, so we're thrilled with the response we've had from customers who have ridden the train. And it's very interesting that a high number of people coming from the North Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast counties of Martin and St. Lucie are actually going down to West Palm Beach and riding the train, getting a fair number of people driving from Orlando. If you're in business in particular, who have business in South Florida, a fair number of people are driving to West Palm Beach, parking in the garage at our station there and continuing on to Miami. And so we're really getting a good feel for what the customer wants, and we're able to adjust our schedules to meet the customer demands, and we think it's working very well. That's phase one. And also, I'll back up. We also had as far as the Virgin brand goes, about November of last year, Richard Branson, the chairman of Virgin Group, came to us and decided that he liked our product, liked our culture, liked the fact that we're sort of what he calls a disruptor in the industry, and decided to join as a minority investor in the company. And when I say disruptor in the industry, we are the first new startup of a passenger rail in just about a century. No company has tried to start up a passenger rail system from scratch in quite a long time. Amtrak was created in 1971 when the older passenger companies went out of business. But the dynamic has changed in terms of people's travel preferences and travel habits, and we recognize an opportunity to make that work here. You have to do it in corridors that work, corridors with city pairs that have the right population and the right movement between. And at the end of that video, you saw that we said we could replicate this in other parts of the country, and we're doing that now. We think that it could be a national model, not just for us, but for other railroad companies to use existing infrastructure to build higher speed, not high speed like in Europe and Japan and China, but higher speed rail, to give people an alternative to crowded roads and more comfortable travel, and especially now that everyone is carrying one of these, and everybody's seen people driving down the road using those. So it's an opportunity to be productive when you travel as well. We are already building a similar system in out west between Las Vegas and Southern California. We have a team out there. With the Richard Branson entry into the company, we've rebranded to Virgin, so you're going to see a slow, well, maybe not a slow, but a definite change in branding to our product as time goes on, where everything will be pretty much the Virgin logo. That's not exactly how the trains are going to look like when we're finished, but that's a representation of what we have. Is this a clicker here? Let me get it right. So I've just given the first slide speech just about where we're operating 67 miles. Those are a couple pictures of our stations. And as I said, we executed our licensing agreement and our partnership with Richard Branson last year. Now, where are we? Why are we here? Because we are beginning construction on phase 2. We are starting now to build the train between West Palm Beach all the way to Orlando. And part of our purpose of being here today is to update you on how that construction works and what kind of impact it'll have on your community, and then how we will be operating after the construction is finished and how long is that going to take. This is a picture of the Orlando Airport Station. We are going into Orlando Airport. Orlando Airport is now the largest airport in terms of traffic in the state. They're right now at a pace of carrying 50 million, having 50 million people a year pass through Orlando Airport. So they are in the middle of building a brand new terminal south of the existing Orlando Airport, and I suspect that a majority, or at least a large number of people in this room, have flown in and out of Orlando at least one time, and you see how busy that airport is. And they're building just to the south of it a new 120-gate terminal, which is larger than the existing airport, which has 100 gates. And in the center of that is an intermodal terminal, which is this picture here, which is a train station. This train station was designed by architects in the 1990s and put on the shelf. The whole new terminal that Orlando Airport is building was designed in the 1990s and put on the shelf for when that airport got so crowded they needed to pull the trigger and build a new airport, which that happened in the last several years, and that is underway. So this is the first thing they built because it is the centerpiece of the new terminal. So we are a tenant in that station. We are a dues rent-paying tenant in that station, and it is designed to carry other train sets, including the Sunrail commuter rail that they have in Central Florida, a light rail system that would take people to the tourist area, International Drive in Orlando, and a people mover that operates now between the new terminal and the old terminal to take you back and forth. And we are the fourth, but we're going to be the first occupier, well, the second, because the people mover is already running, but we'll be the second. And when I say this was designed in the 1990s, the airport knew in their head that someday some passenger rail system would come to Florida. They've been talking about it since 1985, since Bob Graham was governor, for those folks who have been here that long. And so we finished our financing package early this year, got all the financing together to build it, and we are underway, especially in what we call the east-west corridor, which goes between the Orlando Airport and the tracks that are parallel US 1 in the city of Cocoa. And so that project is under the construction management of a joint venture that we created called HSR Constructors. And HSR Constructors is three major rail companies, three of the top rail construction companies in America: Herzog, Stacy & Whitbeck, and Railworks. And they formed a joint venture to build this railroad for us. And using all of these, the talent of all these smaller companies that you see underneath. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jennifer Donaldson right now. Before I do that, I always forget to do this. I'm going to introduce this whole table. To my right, immediate right, is Katie Mitzner. She is our public information officer. Katie just joined the company 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks now. Seems longer already, doesn't it? So she's just joined the company of Public Information Officer. She will be the person that is the liaison with the town of Jupiter, with Palm Beach County, all the towns, cities, and counties along the corridor between West Palm Beach and Orlando. So when construction updates come to the town for posting on your website or however you decide to do that, it'll come from Katie. Jennifer Donaldson is our senior project engineer with the HSR Constructors, and she comes from the Stacy Whitbeck portion of it. Darren Happenstall is with Herzog, Senior Project Director, and he'll be here to answer questions. I'm going to have Jennifer walk you through the construction process, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about the Loxahatchee River Bridge, and talk about our outreach and public information and safety components, and then we'll go to Q&A after that. Do you want to put this back?
Hold it. Thank you, Rusty. Mayor, council members, I appreciate the invite, and we're happy to be here tonight. I'm very terrible about being locked behind a lectern, so I'll probably wander around and wave my arms around a lot, but hopefully that helps a little bit. As Rusty mentioned, my name is Jennifer Donaldson. I am the Senior Project Engineer for HSR Constructors. A little bit about myself. I did graduate with a degree in civil engineering from Colorado State over 19 years ago, and have been all over the United States and internationally working on large, heavy civil projects. Some dams, but mostly transit, light rail, and now high-speed rail. So I'm super excited to be part of this project, and I love construction. I always assume everyone loves it as much as I do. I'm sure that's why you're all here. But we do understand that it can be impactful, and it really is our job to make sure that we come in and leave as quietly as possible, but the best way to do that is to keep you informed of what's going on. So we will work with Virgin Trains, Rusty and Katie and their group to give you as much information as we can. I keep staring at the light, to keep you all informed of what we're doing. So as Rusty mentioned, we are in phase 2 of the overall project. So phase 2 starts in West Palm Beach. It heads up the existing railroad corridor, turns west in Cocoa at what we call the Cocoa Curve, and goes along Highway 528 to the Orlando Airport. HSR Constructors was hired to build the portion, the north-south portion, from West Palm Beach up to Cocoa. During the design phase, they divided the project into 2 halves, a north and a south. We have coined them 4A on the north and 4B on the south, and have structured our construction management group to mirror this. So we have an executive committee that's over the overall project. We have a project management team in the north that's housed out of Melbourne, and we have a project management team that is housed in Fort Pierce that will manage the field activities and construction on the south half, which is where Jupiter falls. Part of our contract, we have approximately 3 years to build this entire project. I will go into more details of what that entails on the next slide. But in order to do so, we divided the project into 3 separate headings. Each one is approximately 40 miles long, and they start, heading 1 starts in West Palm Beach at the very south end and the end tail track of the existing rail that's in service right now. Heading 2 starts just south of the Martin-St. Lucie County line, and heading 3 starts up at the Indian River and Brevard County line. All 3 headings start on the south end and work their way north. All will be going concurrently for the duration of the project in order for us to meet our milestones. The southernmost approximate 12 miles, I'll use a lot of approximations here because everything is subject to change in construction if you're familiar with it. So the southernmost 12 miles approximately, we have to finish early. So we have 16 to 18 months roughly to complete that work. That is soup to nuts, everything included, all the earthwork, everything that goes into it, the track, the systems. And we have to turn that over to Brightline Virgin Trains in order for them to run their trains at a higher speed to make sure all the systems, signals, everything is safe and running smoothly before you allow passengers on it. It's certainly something you want to do, and you never want to be the first person on the very first time that train runs across the track. So we test it out, work all the kinks out, and make sure it's safe for passengers. So part of our project, or everything in our project, we will start with a fiber optic duct bank relocation. Along the entire corridor, there is a duct bank that carries AT&T, Sprint, Verizon. Where that duct bank is now is right under where the new track will go. And we have to move that out of the way, so if the internet ever goes out, all the carriers can access it and get service turned on as quickly as possible. So that is our first order of business. Somewhat concurrently with that, we will do clear and grub. So we'll mow the grass, take down some bushes and trees in order to facilitate the work that we have. Next up will be earthwork. This is obviously to make way for some drainage and also to build the new track roadbed or rail bed. And then we have track construction, obviously, followed by the signals and systems work. So these are obviously quite linear. We also have 18 bridges to construct along the corridor. Those will start somewhere, some of them start very early because the long duration. Some will start in a year or so, but all are relative and will start sooner than the track and earthwork so that they are complete by the time we're ready to run our track across. We also have several walls, and those will be constructed again before the earthwork and track work, so it's ready for when we come through to put the track in. So that's a little bit of the work that we have to do. And now for the crossing. So as we come through and do our rail, the crossings will have to happen somewhat in the same time frame as the rail. When we build rail, we're doing two things. The first thing, we are building an entirely new second rail along the entire corridor. We're also upgrading the existing track to what's called Class 6 rail. So the existing rail is Class 4. Class 6 is a higher speed rail, which means we have tighter tolerances for construction. We have flatter curves and smoother bumps. So as the train's running at a higher speed, it's a safer and smoother ride. So the faster the speed, the tighter everything has to be to make sure it's safe. So that is what we're doing as part of track construction. As we come through and do the track construction, we do have to obviously build track through the road crossings, which is where everyone gets very excited and interested in what's happening. As much as we can, we will do as much as we can from the existing right-of-way or with lane drops. So we'll close one lane and work from the road, or just to give us a little extra space if it's close to the road, so we don't impact traffic, pedestrians, and other folks going through. From a safety and quality standpoint and schedule, we will have to close each crossing in order to build the track through and do our necessary upgrades. From a safety perspective, I know I don't like driving through other people's construction zones. I'm pretty sure everyone in here doesn't like driving through construction zones. And it's safer for you all, and it's safer for our workers if we just keep everyone separate. So we will close the road to give ourselves some work zone and enough space so all our equipment can fit without impacting the public too bad. From a quality standpoint, we can give a better product if we have the entire road to build and the entire crossing to build. It's a smoother ride for the rail, and it will be a smoother ride for the cars as they're driving across the tracks. In addition to that, all the existing signals and gates and cantilevers all need to be either maintained as is. Some of them will have to be relocated to allow room for the second track, and some will be added new. So all of that has to occur during that closure in order for it to be safe and ready when we let traffic go through. These are all the crossings. I wish I could give you exact times. I know many people are here wanting to know exactly when these roads are going to be closed. I can't give you that right now, but we are furiously working and planning. We have some design changes. They're not issues, they're improvements, scope improvements. So all of those things sort of play into our overall plan. And we're working through those, and then we'll come up with a plan B and then a plan C, and it'll all come together. And as we get closer to them, we'll be able to share more accurate dates and timeframes with the City of Jupiter and show them with the community. Again, I mentioned this, but we'll have newer gate mechanisms, new flashers, signs, vehicle presence detection. They will be quiet zone compatible and what's called PTC, or positive train control. So if you're familiar with a lot of the recent accidents on passenger trains, the FRA and National has mandated that all passenger trains have PTC. So if a signal is missed or something happens and an engineer goes around to speed too fast, which they won't, positive train control is sort of a dummy switch that will turn the train. It will let the train know that a signal has been blown and either stop the train or slow the train down. So it's a safety mechanism that has to be in effect, and we will be PTC compliant as well. So this is one example of what a sealed corridor will look like. There are two ways to do this. One, let's see if my flasher works, is the center median. So it'll be a positive barrier, a curb or a short wall. So if a car gets frustrated with the train, it can't go around the gates and cross and run right into a train. So that's one instance. The other way to do a sealed corridor is with quad gates. So where typical railroads would have one gate to stop oncoming traffic, a sealed corridor will have a gate on the exit side to stop traffic from going around the gates and then impacting the train. So these are two mechanisms to ensure pedestrian and traffic safety. If there are sidewalks, they will also have pedestrian gates that will come down to stop pedestrian traffic from crossing. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rusty to talk about the Loxahatchee River.
Thanks very much. One of the other items that was on the agenda was the Loxahatchee River, so I just want to give you a brief overview of the plans for that. This bridge was built in 1925. It's about 580 feet long, and the navigation channel, that is the width of the channel for boats to go under, is about 42 feet. Right now, when the railroad drawbridge is down, it's called a bascule. When the bascule is down, it is there's about 6.5 feet of clearance. That's what they call from the mean high water line, so in between the tides. And then all the approach spans, that is the stationary spans, those are about 4 feet clearance under those. So what are we going to do with that bridge? Basically, we're going to build a brand new bridge on top of those existing piers that are in the water now. I can't remember how many piers are in there, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 8 or 10. And so we're going to build, basically rebuild everything above that portion of the bridge. The entire superstructure of the bascule, the movable span, and its approaches will be replaced. If you've looked at that bridge, you'll see it was designed for 2 tracks. This whole railroad used to be 2 tracks after Henry Flagler first built it, a 2-track railroad. That one track was pulled up in the early 70s when the passenger rail went out of business, Flagler's passenger rail, and then it was freight only. So we're putting that second track back that used to be there. So we are, in effect, actually restoring the property of the railroad to its historic origins. And so with that, there's an abandoned track on that bridge, and that'll be replaced with a new substructure and all new, of course, rail and ties and across the entire bridge. The east side, the existing rail, will also have new rail and new ties and new girders. The girders, I will show you what those are. They're just the metal plates you see on the side of the bridge. In terms of the bascule operations, that'll be totally, obviously, if we're replacing the bascule, we're going to replace all the components to make it move. And so that is the electronics, the hydraulics, the gearing, the racks and pinions, the trunnions. Trunnions is the pivot point that makes that the bridge rides up and down on. And so that'll be totally replaced. What that means is that bridge will be more reliable. Some people are going to ask, well, does that make it go any faster? Not a whole lot. Gravity helps it go down at a pretty good pace, but going up, it's just the physics it's a lot of weight, but it will be a little bit faster, but it'll certainly be more reliable. That bridge has had issues with its alignment when it locks down, making sure it locks down, and when it doesn't lock properly, train has to wait till it's fixed. So all that will be brand new, and we should improve reliability and fluidity on that bridge because of the 2 tracks for freight and passenger to move with ease without having one of the trains pull over and wait for another. And so I said new steel girders, so you see the yellow shaded part here are the girders that were going to be replaced. So some of them are fairly well rusted, some are in good shape, but all those are going to be replaced. And you see that one span there that doesn't have a yellow cover. So we're doing 2 projects on this bridge. We've been working for a couple of years now, maybe more than 2 years, with the Jupiter Inlet District, which is the agency responsible for this river in terms of navigation. And so we talked to them, I don't know, George Gentile is the chairman of the Jupiter Inlet District. He's in the audience, but we started talking about 2.5 years ago, George, about could we modify this bridge at all to allow for more boats to go under, even if there's a rail operation underway. And so we call it the small span. That little area, does this have a pointer thing?
Top middle.
That little red button here? Oh, there you go. That little span right there is what we're talking about modifying so that when this bridge is down for rail operation, this has more clearance, and so boats can go around, bypass this, and go into the bridge anyway. And so that we've been working with the Jupiter Inlet District on that for quite some time to make that happen. And so that is going to involve changing the girders on that instead of hanging low over the water, hanging high above the water and even above the track. Engineering-wise, these folks are engineers, I'm not, but they say that the way they're able to design it will maintain the integrity of the bridge and allow boats to go under that, which they might not be able to go under when the drawbridge is down. So we're gaining about almost 4 feet, 3.75 feet of vertical clearance under that span, and we are told, based on surveys, that about 70 to 80% of the boats who use this river would be able to go under the bridge regardless of whether a train is coming through or not. And the channel is being dug here. Is that right, George? There'll be the channel new dredged here so that boats can go into that. So that construction is going to happen simultaneously with our rebuilding of the bridge. Really what we're going to do first is we're going to do this project first so that it can be available for boats to go around when this project is underway, because there will be some periods of closures of the bridge while we replace this span. But if we fix this, it'll be less difficult. It'll be a lot easier for boats to continue to use the river and avoid this construction that's going on here. That construction is expected to start, we think, early next year. We are now finalizing contracts with our potential contractors who are going to do the work. They've not been finalized yet, but once that is done, you will see construction along that area. How are we going to do that? There will be a temporary trestle built alongside of the bridge. This side for sure, possibly temporarily. On the other side, a temporary wooden trestle type bridge so that equipment can be brought over the water and do the work, large cranes and those kinds of things, and also for barges to bring in materials. And so that temporary trestle will be built, and then once the bridge is complete, obviously we remove the trestle. So this is a side view of what that might look like with the new raised girder, the red area there, so more boats can go underneath the bridge. We're very excited to have been in this partnership with the Jupiter Inlet District to do this work. And so we're hoping how many boaters in the room? There are too many folks. So hopefully 80% of you will be able to use that new service when that is finished. Another view, kind of a close-up view of what that looks like. There was I guess a fishing walkway on the other side that's already been removed, so that will not be an impediment. The next phase of our update, we're getting close to the Q&A time. I know folks are itching to ask some questions, is our public outreach. And I'm going to have Katie come and talk a little about that. We have a fairly aggressive public outreach program, as I mentioned in the beginning, how we try to keep the public informed of what's going to happen. And one of the most important things, I'm going to steal your thunder here just for a quick second, is that picture right there, which is our website, where you can look up yourself to see what we're doing. Okay, do you want to go and talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm Katie Mitzner, the Public Information Officer for Phase 2, so going from West Palm all the way to Orlando, and I'm based in Orlando. So one of the things that we're going to start doing is sending out weekly construction updates. I know some of you may have noticed last week when there was some temporary closures on the crossings. We were transporting rails down to different areas to station them so that when we begin the construction they are there, and so that did cause some temporary closures. Everything from that to if we're going to be doing clearing and grubbing, that would, something that would impact the public, and you want to know just what's happening, we're going to include that in our weekly updates. So the question is, where do you get our weekly updates? Well, there are a couple of places. One is the railroad construction website. If you go to Brightline.com and go to railroad construction, we will be updating that weekly. It'll be an advisory that'll go out, and it'll be by county. The other is Twitter. So I'm not sure how many of you use Twitter. If you don't, I would suggest you try it. I've asked this question in some of our meetings with some of our engineers, and they all look at me like I have two heads. So, but it is helpful because you can get it on your phones, and when we post an update, it's going to throw it up there on your home screen and it's going to show it to you. The other thing is I'm working with Kate from City of Jupiter, and so when we post something on our Twitter account, they are going to retweet it and put it out there as well. So if you're following City of Jupiter or you're following Palm Beach County, we're going to be working in tandem with them to make sure we get the information out. Another benefit of social media is that it can be timely. So if we do have something, as much as we want to plan ahead a week or two and give you those weekly updates, if we do have something that's last minute, we're going to push it out there on social media and get it out there. Now, the other component of it is the news media. And we thank all of you for being here today. I'm a former news reporter, covered many public meetings in my day. So we'll be working with news media as well. So getting those advisories out to them on a weekly basis so that they can go ahead and post it on their website, go ahead and do a story on it, update it so that you'll have that information in many different places, so we're keeping you informed. My contact information is up there, including my cell phone number and my email address. And I am the liaison, the person you can reach out to, and I will work on getting you answers to your questions. So we're going to go ahead. Let's see, where's
State.
Okay, so I'm going to let Rusty start with this.
So
Outreach campaigns.
part of our safety outreach and public awareness involves an outside group we called Operation Lifesaver, which is a national nonprofit group that's basically funded by all the railroads and in part by Florida U.S. DOT, Department of Transportation. We work, Operation Lifesaver, they really shine when it comes to educating children about behavior around railroad tracks. They do seminars in schools. They create lots of materials to educate children about railroad safety. We've used those materials, and we go into schools and have them sign little pledge cards, say, I will not play on tracks, those kinds of things. We do that quite aggressively, especially in advance of the beginning of operations, and we will do that here. We have a very professional safety and security team. Our safety and security team are mostly police officers, either railroad police or other police officers who now work for us that handle our security and our training for first responders. We do all kinds. Do we have a slide on that? Does it? Or is that ahead of us? Let's just go one. Maybe we can go to that
one of the
next.
things from a public notification standpoint, we have our variable message signs, public service announcements, earned media, working with news media to get the information out there, and online communication. This is, Rusty, if you want to go ahead, because these are fun facts and numbers with regards to our outreach.
We first of all, we have 40, I think more than 40 now since this slide was created, that teammates who are actually Operation Lifesaver volunteers. We've trained over 500 bus drivers. We do a lot of PSAs on television and radio. We did a mailing with the Palm Beach County School Board at the beginning of service in Phase 1, where we sent out 92,000 pieces of mail to homes that have school children on the east side of the county to talk about, actually that's in two counties, talk about railroad safety, 3 counties. A lot of literature, and we have something, and we do in Miami called a buzz box. It's actually a rolling barber shop where kids, especially in poor communities, get haircuts and they get education about mailings, about rail safety. We will do similar things up here before we start operations. It's very important to educate the public not only about what's happening in the railroad with more trains going by, but how to avoid incidents, the laws with regard to railroad safety, with regard to trespassing, going around gates, those kinds of things, which is a real problem. And we expect that to happen well in advance of our starting our rail operations, which, if anyone's going to ask, is probably about mid-2022, so we have time to prepare for that. This is, we'll leave this slide up for a while. This is contact information for Katie and myself. If anybody wants to write it down and needs to contact us, we're certainly available. That's just a broad overview. We didn't want to bore you too much with our speaking because we know some people want to ask some questions. So, Kate, if you think we're ready to go, we'd be happy to answer any questions. If anybody on the panel have anything. will start, the gentleman on the left,
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
on my left.
The projects that the works you've laid out here looks very expensive and very costly. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
I'll repeat.
The work that you've laid out here looks quite costly and expensive, substantial. Can you tell us more about the financing arrangements that are in place? Do you have the cash in hand to cover the cost of what's laid out here over the next several years?
We have invested, I should say, about $1.6 billion of our own equity. We have raised about $2.7 billion in tax-exempt bonds, which is a federal program created in 2005 by Congress to incentivize private sector to invest in public or in infrastructure that serves a public purpose. So we utilize these tax-exempt bonds, which are no risk to the taxpayers. They are 100% risk of the investor. Private investors buy the bonds, and we have raised all the money. We're quite confident we've raised all the money we need to build the project all the way to Orlando. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. One, the slide said that the crossings will be quiet zone compatible. Does that mean that they will be certified as quiet zones? And also, with the railroad bridge bascule span, will you still use the 3 horns that go off every time the span goes down? The reason I'm interested is I, along with 132 other residents, live in a condominium development very close to the Riverside crossing and the railroad bridge.
That's a good question on the rail horns, on the bridge horn. And I think the answer is, I'm not 100% sure that I'm up to date on that. I think the answer is yes, the horns have to blow. I believe it's a regulation. I don't know, George, if you know anything about that, horns with the bridge going down, but it's a warning. That's a Coast Guard. I believe it's a Coast Guard regulations. I'm not sure we have much control over that. With regard to quiet zones, we are confident that when we complete construction, the entire Palm Beach County, will even Martin and beyond, but the entire section of this corridor of Phase 2 will be quiet zone compliant. What that means is, if the town of Jupiter chooses to apply for a quiet zone, they can do so. So quiet zones under federal regulations are actually local responsibility. If a town or a county wants to have a quiet zone under the federal regulations, and we didn't do this here, but under the federal regulations, the town would have to actually pay for the infrastructure necessary to qualify for a quiet zone. What does that mean? If you want a quiet zone, that means the train horn no longer blows. If you take that safety component away, you have to replace it with new safety components to compensate for the loss of safety of a horn. That would be extra gates, or what Jennifer showed of a center median going down the center. Anything that will discourage or keep anybody from trying to beat the train. That is the most common form of incident on a train, when someone tries to beat the train by going around a gate. So you have to beef up the security of that crossing to compensate for the loss of the horn. And under the federal regulations, railroads cannot apply for that. The community who wants the quiet zone must apply. So that would be up to the town of Jupiter, or I believe the way we did it in the Phase 1 is the MPO did most of the work. Certainly we've been working with the MPO from day one to make sure that the county is a quiet zone. And so I believe they, for the southern part of the county from West Palm South, they did the paperwork that's required to submit to the Federal Railroad Administration. I think the town signed it, did the paperwork, and then I think it's 21 days after you apply, assuming that FRA determines that you've qualified, then automatically the quiet zone starts. So that's the long answer to the question. The short answer is yes, you'll certainly can have a quiet zone if Jupiter chooses to do so. Yes, sir.
Just a brief couple comments. I have to say, when I first heard about the proposal for this project many years ago, I laughed at myself and I said, there's no way our leaders would ever allow a project like that. It just doesn't make sense. Nobody's going to ride it. And every time I hear an announcement that this project is going forward, I'm amazed, because the risk benefit is not there. The risk is much, much greater than the benefit. Nobody's going to ride the thing. It's going to be financially unsustainable. The risk of fatalities is going to increase greatly. And for what? There's no benefit. It's only a way to extract more tax money from the taxpayers. I'm going to tonight I'm going to ask the town council of the town of Jupiter to pass a resolution denouncing this project and disallow it to come through the city limits of the town of Jupiter. And if there's too much money involved and the project goes forward anyway, I'm going to ask the town council to require every intersection crossing to be elevated to reduce that risk of fatalities. Good luck. I hope you stop in West Palm and don't come up here.
I appreciate the gentleman's sentiment. I will say that no taxpayer dollars have been used. We've not asked for any taxpayer dollars from Palm Beach County or Jupiter. It's a private company on private land, and it's a business venture. So as I mentioned with the funding, there's no risk to taxpayers, so we're not asking anybody to underwrite this project.
I could address that, but I've got other things that are more important to say because I disagree with him wholeheartedly on the cost to the taxpayers. But beyond that, 56 people have died on the FEC corridor since this project started. Virgin is responsible for 31 deaths in 21 months. That's a clip of one death every 19 days. Your trains aren't going anywhere near the speed they're going to go when they get here. I know you want to chalk it up to suicide, but the fact remains that we do not have exponentially more people with a death wish on your short corridor. Safety is a huge issue, and you have really not stepped forward. I see your pictures of the quad gates. Is that going to be at all 160 at-grade crossings? Are you going to completely fence the corridor like the independent study by the OPAGA study, which is the Office of I can't remember.
It's a state version of GAO.
Yeah, they say that with trains this speed, it needs to be completely fenced, and you're not stepping forward with that. And the other thing is, why hasn't a safety study been done on the entire corridor and released to the public? We have the right to know. 31 people have died. So my question is, how do you sleep at night?
Well, the fact remains. I appreciate what you're saying. The fact remains that suicide by train is a problem, and whether fencing will not discourage anybody who wants to do away with their life in using a train is going to be able to access it at a crossing. We are actually putting fencing in several places. We have areas here in Jupiter where it's going to be fenced. It is not necessary to fence the entire railroad. If you ride along it, you will see a lot of the area is already fenced, not just by the railroad, but by private sector people who are along the corridor, businesses or neighborhoods or others who have fencing in there. So we are doing what we call a system safety plan that does review the corridor. It's like a hazard analysis. Look at the corridor and say where fencing is needed and where it would be effective. We're doing some additional fencing in phase 1, and we will be doing this review of the corridor throughout the next 3 years as we build toward Orlando. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you did mention the quiet zone. Does that come after 10 o'clock at night?
24 hours a day. 24 hours. So, yeah, so the train's horns would be silenced all the time. The only time you would hear the horn if the conductor, the engineer, excuse me, sees a hazard, sees somebody on the tracks and they blow the horn, or cars or something like that. So if there's an emergency ahead or an obstruction ahead, the conductor, the engineer can blow the horn, but the horns would be silent even through the night.
Okay, so, but the hours of service, is it 24 hours a day?
Oh, no. So our trains will probably, you would not see, except maybe very occasionally, a train past 11 p.m.
That late?
Well, it depends on where you are. For instance, in South Florida, where we're running now, and I say we can be very flexible in our scheduling. It depends on market demand. On weekends in particular, we're running trains later from Miami north because there's a lot of people going to Miami for entertainment purposes, dinner or some event or a play or something like, or the Broward Performing Arts Center, and so we can schedule trains to accommodate those customers. But some in West Palm, there's many trains during the weekday. The last train is at 8 o'clock, so it depends on what the market is demanding.
And what do you figure the time frame between Donald Ross Road and County Line Road, which is where there's 9 crossings.
Time frame for
How
what?
much time will it take for that train to get from there to there?
Gee, I don't know. I will tell you that one crossing lasts about 48 seconds, 45, 48 seconds.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
So from the time it opens, the gates come down, it's 48 seconds and
Yes,
the
ma'am.
train
For our passenger trains, the freight trains are very different, and
Oh, right, of
your experience has been sitting waiting forever for a freight train.
Yeah, we
It is
know
very
that.
different with a short passenger train. We have 6 cars. Eventually, it'll be 9 cars. That's the length it'll be, but it's pretty quick.
And I guess
Less than a traffic light.
The other questions answered the others I had.
Thank you. Councilman.
Good evening. I'd like to just first introduce myself. I'm the Vice Mayor of Town of Jupiter. I am a professional engineer and also a project manager. I'm also the town's representative on what you refer to as the MPO, now called the Transportation Planning Agency. So as a professional engineer and an elected official, there's nothing more important than public safety. And, 4 months ago, we had all aboard Florida in here, and we were expressing our concerns about safety, and we've made no progress since then, and I've continued to advocate. We know that south of us, the trains are traveling at 79 mile an hour. When they enter into Jupiter, they'll be going at 110 mile an hour. So we are very concerned and expect to get a sealed corridor that's not just not at the crossings. So I'm going to ask you, please, we're asking for a commitment to work with the town on figuring out a way how we're going to seal the corridor through the town of Jupiter on FEC right-of-way. It's the only way it can be done. We need that commitment.
Well, I know that our engineering team, and I don't know if one of you two want to take that, but I know that our engineering team continues to work on the design, and we are slowly but surely passing those designs out to the various communities through which we plan to operate. And I think we'd be happy to certainly engage in those discussions. We're going to do what makes sense, and as I said, we are already planning some areas in the area where it's in the city, in the town, where it's going to be the fencing will go up. It is not required everywhere. It is not necessary everywhere. And fencing is a two-edged sword. When you put fencing up, it has also the effect of delaying first responders to get into a corridor if there is an incident. It traps people on the train in the corridor if there's an incident. So there's keeping people out and there's keeping people in, and so you have to be very judicious about how you do that. That's why the Federal Railroad Administration for 35-40 years has been studying fencing. Since 1970, they've done 3 major studies on is fencing. Does it work in railroads? And they have concluded every time that it is ineffective. And most of the time they say it is ineffective because people are always just breaking through the fence, cutting through the fence if they want to have a path.
In all due respect, I would just ask for a commitment to work with us. We haven't seen that in 4 years. We believe we need a sealed corridor. People can't judge trains moving at 79. They can't judge trains approaching at 110 mile an hour. So please commit to work with us. Secondly, just with regard to the crossings, and I appreciate the fact that it's been represented that this is going to be coordinated, and I speak the same way if this is a road project. We want the schedules for the road crossing work to be coordinated by calendar time. We hope that Indiantown Road, for example, is not going to be closed down in peak season, and we also, so we want to work with you to make sure, we don't want to hear you're going to tell us the town of Jupiter would like to work to make sure that the public has the least disruption. And I'm asking the question, do you commit to coordinate with us on planning that?
We've already started that coordination, Councilman. We, with Jennifer and Darren leading that effort, we've started meeting with your public works people and talked just about those same issues. I don't know if there's anything you two want to add to that. We have committed to work with you to understand what periods we should not be doing work. We've committed to you to make sure, and we're doing this everywhere, that we don't close two crossings that are adjacent to each other, because that makes no sense when you're trying to do detours, so we space them out. We've asked your town to give us information on all the special events, so we make sure we don't interrupt those special events of people coming downtown or whatever. So we're working with your team pretty regularly on that.
No, I have no doubt you are, but staff tends to accept the way things have always been done, and elected officials don't. We want it planned better than normal road construction projects. Thank you.
I have to say, I think that we have a pretty professional team, and I would say we're one railroad that goes to the extra mile to make sure that we coordinate as best we can with every community that we're going through, and listen to those concerns, which is not always the case. Yes, sir.
Thanks for the time that you're spending here. Just as an observation, you spend a lot of time telling people how much you've spent on safety and planning and what they can do to make the railroad safe, as opposed to what you are doing to make the railroad safe physically. Sending out brochures, going to first responders and telling them how to respond to a problem with the railroad is not safety for these people that are sitting here. They live on one side of the track. First responders live on the other side of the track. How are they going to get to the first responder, or is the first responder going to get to them when your train is stopped waiting for the bridge to go down? That's the question, which you don't answer. And I'm not asking you that question. What I am asking is, you talked about raising the space on your bascule bridge so that boats could get under. You're not raising the track.
The track, actually, not much. The track is going to be raised a little bit in the main span. It's not really a dramatic
I wanted to
raise.
point out that the reason that the road is high as it is because there are boats that need to get under there without raising a bridge.
Mhm.
Those boats, no matter how high you raise that little thing a couple of inches, they're not going to get under that. This is a fishing community. A lot of boats go through there. And raising from 4.5 to 6 feet just isn't going to do it.
Have you ever wondered why you don't see railroad bridges that go high like that highway bridge?
Oh, sure, I know why. Because you're driven by degrees of incline for a railroad that can't get up, especially when you're using 1800 technology that you're trying to do a high-speed train on. There were a lot of solutions that we had offered years ago. You're going to try to make a fast train go through a highly populated area. Everybody in this room would have been on your train if it went from West Palm to Orlando through the middle of Florida where nobody lives. But you told us, and you told our congressman, and I quote, "We are going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter what you want."
You didn't hear me say that, sir.
I didn't say you said it. Your company said it.
He said the chief.
There's a lot of strong feeling here. You could do a lot by being open with people and factual rather than smoke and mirrors. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Unlike most people in this room, I actually support this rail service. I'm with the Palm Beach Model Railroad Club, and one thing I want to point out is people are all up in arms about how many people have been killed, but what about the people that have been killed on the highways? About 30,000 people a year have been killed on I-95 alone in 1 year in Florida. I don't think the problem's the trains. I think the problem is the drivers. My question is, when are these new train sets and cars going to be coming in, and when are you going to be done with the construction in Jupiter, and when are you starting it?
Done with the construction in Jupiter is probably at least a year
2 years, I'd say.
2 years.
So once we get started, Jupiter does fall within the test track portion of the alignment. So we have to get that done sooner, as I stated. So definitely within 2 years, hopefully a little sooner, we'll be through here.
And as soon as you're done, you're going to start test running the trains on that corridor? Or?
Yes, Virgin Trains will have an opportunity, and has to by federal regulations. They have to have certain number of hours for each of their operators and their trains on the new track to make sure that the engineers are familiar with the track and to ensure that all the sound signals systems all work correctly.
To answer your question, in terms of revenue service, carrying people to Orlando mid-2022, we have 5 train sets now that we are using. We will have 5 more in the barn by then.
And one thing I also want to mention, I in fact actually used Brightline last Friday to go to a concert. So a lot of people also say that people don't use this train. Well, people do use it, and I'm one of them. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. You get real close. Get real close. I'll repeat.
Hello?
Oh, there
That's
you go.
good. Okay. You're talking about the trains running between 12 and 16 hours a day, is that correct?
That's
So if you're going to run 32 to 36 trains a day, you're talking, 20 minutes to a half hour in between. Am I correct?
about 30 minutes.
About 30 minutes. Now, if you have a train station, how long is the train going to be at the train station holding up the crossing of those roads?
At a train station, we're not holding up a crossing. The train station is not going across roads. We're not blocking roads at a train station. Go down to West Palm Beach or Fort Lauderdale Station and look at those stations.
The gates will not be down at that point.
No, we're in between crossings. But to answer your question is 2 minutes. So if you leave right now from West Palm Beach and go to Miami, when you stop in Fort Lauderdale, it's 2 minutes. People get off, people get on, the train continues.
Okay. And you're talking 32 to 36 trains a day, that's what you said, correct?
About 16 each way.
16 each way. Okay. And what about the freight trains? This is in addition to the freight trains, am I correct?
In addition to our trains, freight trains, which have been running for 125 years, will continue to run. We have, though, moved, we early on made arrangements with Florida East Coast Railway, which is no longer part of our company, but they have moved a large number of their trains to nighttime. That's probably why you're hearing more horns at night, I suppose. But many of their trains, most of their trains are now running at night. They're running obviously some during the day. They have to, they have customers to serve, but nighttime service generally for freight, so they don't interact with us too much.
So if you're on the east side of the track and you have a heart attack, you're dying in the ambulance on the way over to the hospital.
Ma'am, freight trains have been running for 125 years.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
You're not only having the freight trains at this point, you're also having the passenger trains.
I appreciate what you're saying. 32 short trains. We've been running now for 18 months in South Florida. We haven't had that problem. Tri-Rail, which is just like us, but a little bit different type of service, has been running for 20 years. Please do research how many people have been stopped by have been in an ambulance and have lost their life because of that. It's just not something that is an issue.
How many?
None.
Well, that was my question anyway. So we can figure on every half hour.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my question has to do with the Loxahatchee River. I live in a community on the Loxahatchee River, has about 100 homes that are on the water that have docks, and I would say that 80% of the boats in our community would not fit under that bridge. So I would absolutely say that 80% of them being able to fit under that little area, I don't see where that works. But my question is, the Coast Guard made a ruling that out of every 2 hours of operation, 1 hour the bridge must be open. how do you intend to accomplish that with 32 additional trains a day?
The operating rules out of 120 minutes, 1 hour, within that 120 minutes, the bridge should be open. It's not for a solid hour. Obviously, it's up and down during those hours.
Right.
We've actually worked on a schedule. It was part of our negotiations we had when we were talking with Martin County to make sure that there's a guaranteed block of time that the bridge will be open. So you as a mariner know that this section of time, 15 minutes, whatever it is always going to be open. The other thing we did was what boaters need basically is predictability. So now when you go toward the bridge, you have no idea whether that bridge is up or down, waiting for a freight train or open. And so in order to get you predictability, one is to develop an operating schedule that has a guaranteed opening time. Otherwise, it's open and close as needed, just like the highway bridges are when boats are going under and blocking cars, open and close as needed. But also, we will develop an app. We've developed it for New River. We're actually improving it for your iPhone or whatever phone you have. So you can go to the app, Loxahatchee River Bridge app, and see the status of the bridge, when it is scheduled to go down, or if it's down, when it'll be up. So you know when to leave your dock and know that you can do that at a timing so that you don't have to wait for it. Also, we will put what we call a countdown clock on the bridge with a countdown clock letting you know when the bridge is going to go down, if it's on its way down, or when it's going to be, if you show up and it is down, how long before it goes up. So we're trying to do those kinds of things to give boaters more predictability.
But will you comply with the Coast Guard ruling on that?
Well, I'm not going to say no. We're going to do our best to comply. We certainly want to make sure that we comply with all the rules.
Okay, and also it made it sound like the bridge is going to be shut to the Loxahatchee River for a period of time during construction. Will that be like a week, like a day, like 5 months?
There might be periods where the bridge is, the main channel is closed for a day or two at a time. We're going to try and space it up so we're not closed. We have no intentions or no plans right now in the construction phase to close that bridge for a long period of time, like a week or 2 weeks, that kind of thing. Right now, we're working with contractors to make sure we develop the best and most efficient way to rebuild that bridge, and with a minimal closures. That's one of the reasons why we did the adjacent span, so that some boats would not be bothered by that. And so there's going to be periods of closures, but we're going to make them as short as possible. They tell me maybe a couple of days. And obviously, we would try and do that, not on the weekend, but on the weekday, so that we wouldn't inconvenience too many people. It's a construction project. There's always inconveniences in a construction project.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Chip Block, Vice Mayor of the small but mighty town of Jupiter Inlet Colony.
Yes, sir.
Todd, don't feel offended. I got the same applause you did. Couple of things. First of all, I want to make sure that the construction of the bridge or the reconstruction of the bridge doesn't take place at the same time as the replacement of the US 1 bridge, because those are our two north-south arteries. Secondly, Tri-Rail is very important. Part of the reason you got some support up here for Brightline is because of the idea that Tri-Rail would come up to Jupiter. But there's no written assurance, as I understand. There's no written agreement that you have to rent the tracks to Tri-Rail at a reasonable rate. Plus, you're talking about putting a couple more stations in, which directly competes with Tri-Rail. So what kind of assurance are you going to give that you're going to charge Tri-Rail a reasonable rate? And then two other things. There are only two passenger rail services in the world, Paris to Lyon and Tokyo to Osaka, that are profitable. Everybody else, every other train route in the world, passenger train route, requires government subsidies. And the last thing is that it isn't entirely true that this is totally privately financed, because the bonds are guaranteed by the public, The special purpose bonds.
That's incorrect, sir.
The special purpose bonds are guaranteed by taxpayers.
These are not special purpose bonds. They are not guaranteed by the taxpayer.
So you didn't issue any special purpose bonds, or there's no fallback?
It's a special category of bond created by Congress called exempt facility bonds, 100% investor risk, no backing of the government, no guarantees.
All right. Thank you.
You got me going on that one. What was the other part of the question I was going to answer?
Okay, the first is US 1 and alternate A1A and making sure that
we're in touch with FDOT on that. I'm not sure how we're handling that. We're certainly in touch with FDOT.
It's very, very important for us to be able to get north to south and vice versa. The second thing is Tri-Rail.
So Tri-Rail, look, that's a three-party conversation. That's not only now Brightline, but it's also Florida East Coast Railway, and of course Tri-Rail. And the discussions have occurred sporadically over the years. No decisions have been made. I can't commit to you now of anything, and certainly in terms of what is going to be charged. That's above my pay grade. But I do know that long term, we think there's room for Tri-Rail to move over on the tracks, especially at Jupiter. As you know, the CSX line, the Tri-Rail line, was connected to our line just north of West Palm Beach. One of the reasons, not only was that done to accommodate freight being able to shift from one to the other, but to also allow for Tri-Rail to move off their track and come up to Jupiter. So those discussions need to finalize. We probably aren't going to be able to pick up those discussions again until we are finished to Orlando. We are laser focused on finishing this train to Orlando, and then I think we'll be in a position to revisit that issue.
And then the last thing was now I've forgotten. It's okay. Thank you.
If you remember, just shout out. Yes, sir.
Are you planning to have such a meeting in Palm Beach Gardens too? Or?
We already did. When we did? Yeah, we did Palm Beach Gardens.
So I have a couple of questions. Have you provided the city of Palm Beach Gardens with alignment plans, construction plans, operation plans? It sounds to me, according to your schedule, that we are pretty advanced. Are you going to share, or my understanding is that you are going to share the corridor with the freight and also with Tri-Rail. Is this correct?
So he's asking if we're going to share construction plans with the city of Palm Beach Gardens and any of the cities, and the answer is yes.
Have you shared them already, or they are still in the making?
So the plans were shared several years ago, and a lot of counties, communities made comments on them. Since the project was delayed a bit, those comments have kind of been dusted off and they're being incorporated into the plans. And once all those comments have been incorporated, those revised plans will then be shared with the communities again to make sure that all their comments were incorporated.
It sounds to me like you still need to make decisions how to operate with Tri-Rail and with the freight. So you have to go back and revise those plans, or this is not the case?
Some of the plans are being revised all the time. I don't know, I can't speak to Palm Beach Gardens, but many of the cities, we looked at crossings as we received comments from towns and municipalities and counties. We have modified plans. The sharing the track with the freight is the main reason why we are double tracking the corridor. That's not an issue any longer. It is very possible to share the track with freight. It happens all over the country. And that's why we're doing the double tracking, and that's why we're installing positive train control as a safety measure.
Understood. So you do have a safe distance. You can provide a safe distance between the freight track and the passenger track.
Absolutely, safe distance between the two. Look,
there will not be time separation.
We have air traffic controllers for trains, just like the planes have air traffic controllers. We have a central office called dispatch, train dispatch, that monitors the movement of trains for spacing and time and all that sort of stuff.
Who will be dispatching for all three railroads? That means the Tri-Rail?
Well, you keep talking about Tri-Rail. It's not on our corridor yet, and I don't know when that will happen. So right now, it's just the two trains.
Just the two.
Just the two trains. They're dispatched out of Jacksonville, Florida. The two railroads actually contract with a third party called Florida Dispatch Company, and it's a company we created to be able to dispatch both trains under the same roof.
Now, by now you may have ideas based on the ridership that you estimated and the demand. How frequently those trains will run, your trains?
He asked how frequently trains will run. Well, again, if we're running about 16 trains a day. We start early in the morning, 6 o'clock or so, but every hour. So right now our schedule in South Florida is hourly service. So every hour you can get on a train. There's a couple of trains in the morning that come 30 minutes apart, but generally it's every hour.
Have you conducted any ambience noise?
Oh, yeah, yes. I'm going to answer this is your last question because you're taking up everybody else's time. But yeah, we did a 4-year environmental impact study that studied everything you can imagine what an environmental impact would be on the train, including ambient noise from the train and vibration. And I will tell you that the noise from our modern, brand new passenger trains are much quieter than a freight locomotive. Freight locomotives are loud. They're hauling tons and tons of goods and cars, rail cars, and so they have to be very powerful engines. We don't have to be. We also our trains they carry people, so they have suspension systems that quiets down the train.
Are your trains electrified? Or?
Our train, we run on diesel electric engines, and we burn, by the way, 100% vegetable-based biofuel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to first offer a little sympathy for the mayor. Seeing that he lives west of the tracks on Riverside, he may have to leave a little earlier for work to get to town, and he may wind up getting home a little bit later, so because of the trains. But I live 2 blocks west of the railroad tracks on Center Street, and I have a boat that requires 11-foot clearance. And I've waited many an hour for that bridge with the trains, for the freight trains to pass. I would like you to add something to your presentation. One of them is, and maybe I'm wrong in my calculations, but you were going to add about 11,000 openings and closings of the bridge per year. Is that correct?
I haven't done that math.
Well, I was a math major. So anyway, you've done about 11,000 crossings of the bridge per year, which will be during the peak hours and the daytime when boaters are out there. And I suspect it may take 10 minutes as a minimum for that bridge to go down and go up and the train to pass, which will come out to at least 5 hours a day that bridge is going to be down, that is not down right now. Am I correct with those statistics? And would you incorporate those in your presentation in the future?
I will do that.
Okay. And there is no option for improving the crossing in terms of the bridge as far as elevation. It's going to be the 6.5 it is now, correct? There's no options there.
Because the freight company will continue to use that bridge, they can't go high because freight trains can't go more than 1 degree grade incline, 1.5% incline, and so we're pretty limited.
Yeah, I guess when you're pulling over 100 cars, it gets pretty tough, huh?
It does. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hello. All right. I just wanted to show my support for rail in general. I came up here because of the first few people who were against the project. I think it's very important for the future of the state. It's a good way to get us around, to get us using, more of our locations around the state. Kids can go to school in Orlando a lot easier, vacations, Miami. So I think it's very important. So I wanted to just show my support. However, I never understood why. It seems too from this presentation that you're having to do a lot of work on the existing tracks. So why was it considered to move the tracks inland, maybe along an interstate similar to how they have it in Atlanta? It just, for many reasons, having anything near the coast is probably a bad idea long term, and it just you'd probably avoid a lot of this disruption in coastal communities if you had it along, 95 or along the turnpike?
Well, I think first of all, you talk about disruption, and other people have talked about it. We've been running now for 20 months in South Florida, and some of the issues that are brought up here and have been brought up in countless town meetings have not occurred down there. The mayor's not going to be any more delayed getting to downtown than he is today, and that's just not going to be those kinds of delays you're talking about. In terms of moving the train, there's a reason why the California High-Speed Rail project is budgeted around $75 billion, because they're trying to do a brand-new right-of-way, to acquire right-of-way to build a train. We happen to own this rail corridor, and so that's where we're going to put the train. If we were to move the train to another corridor, we'd have to buy land. It would make the project so expensive, it's not feasible to do it. And so and the other reason is, passenger trains are successful when they go through urban communities. Taking the train through the middle of the state is not going to serve Jupiter. It's not, if we were on the CSX track, for instance, or built our own track, not going to serve Jupiter, not going to serve anybody on the Treasure Coast, Vero, Stewart, Fort Pierce, not going to serve Cocoa. It's just going to go to Orlando. We intend to be able to serve all these communities. The Vice Mayor, I've remembered your question, wherever you are, and that is profitable railroads. There are many more profitable railroads than the ones he mentioned, and 3 in the United States, including the Northeast Corridor of Amtrak and the Eurostar between Paris and London, all profitable. And so it is possible to make a profitable railroad, and that's when you have to pick the right corridors, which are populations like we have in South Florida and Central Florida, the movement between those two regions, and what we, in an area we call too short to fly, too long to drive. You can't build this everywhere, but you can build it in certain places.
Thank you. I look forward to taking it a lot around the state.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bernie. You said that when you first started, I think you said that this was all privately funded, and I'm sure that your railroad and your trains and everything are, but I read in the paper the other day that Miami-Dade County had put in $76 million towards you, and good for you. And Boca Raton, I don't know what they're doing. They're donating land and building a building down there too. And I'd like to talk just a little bit about your safety here. I saw in the paper yesterday, or I guess it was today, that a lady got killed down on Nottingham Boulevard in West Palm Beach. I know that grade crossing very well. As a little boy, I used to go to Southborough Elementary School and across that, and my mama taught me that they had back then, I saw that you had some things up there that you're teaching the school children, and one thing that you had a long time ago, you had railroad crossing signs, and you had a little sign up there that said, stop, look, and listen. And I think that's a very, very good policy for not only school kids, but people driving cars also. I'd like to talk real quickly about today, what's happening today. I know we're here for Brightline, but this is directed to all my elected officials in the town of Jupiter. Kresge said that they started talking about quiet zones about 4 years ago. About 10 years ago, they started talking about it, and you had an ad hoc committee. I was on it for 2 meetings, and then they stopped having meetings for some reason. What I'd like to know is how many people tonight, besides myself, would like to have quiet zones now? Because what we got, you got those train horns, like the lady moved into Jonathan's Landing, and she told Jerry Zeitler asked her, he says, how do you like your new home? She said, I like it fine. He says, do the trains bother you? She says, no, but those goddamn horns, so if there's some way that the town of Jupiter can put a stop to those horns now, I think a lot of people would appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'd just like to get some clarification. From all the way from Palm Beach Gardens to Hope Sound, the train's going to be going right through residential, some very expensive, nice residential family sections. Brightline, Virgin, all aboard Florida, whatever, is going to be going one way, and the other train's going to be going the other way. So we're going to be getting trains coming and going, correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want to know. On the same track at the same time?
Well, no, we have double tracks.
Right, but they'll be next to each other.
Yes.
All right, the Port of Palm Beach is expanding, everything's expanding. They're going to be bringing more products up this way and down the other way. Also, the LNG and everything. So we're going to be going, Mike, I want to know, so passenger trains and the products...
Get close to the mic.
Okay, the passenger trains and the flammable products are going to be going side by side, right? And if a train derails all around the communities, what is set up? Because you guys haven't built any barriers for the communities. Or am I, over-exaggerating or over-concerned? Or is it a possibility? Or are you saying it is not a possibility? Because there's flammables, and there's more coming from the Port of Palm Beach. And I live closer to, it used to be train tracks. It was the wrong side of town. Now, not quite. Not in this corridor. There's a lot of nice family-oriented communities.
Well, freight companies have been, actually by law, cannot turn down materials to haul even hazardous materials. They have to carry, obviously get a fair price for it. I will tell you this, Florida East Coast Railway has had a reputation for decades of being one of the safest railroads in the country. They were one of the first in the nation to install or develop what they call ATC, automatic train control, which is the precursor to positive train control. They've had it since the 80s. Automatic train control already prevents train-to-train collisions, and you've never seen that, and you're not going to on this railroad. Positive train control does that, plus more, including speed restrictions. It avoids situations where the train is going too fast around a curve, automatic slowdowns or automatic stops. We also installing something called vehicle presence detection. Somebody was asking about crossings in sealed corridor. By the way, we are building to what we call sealed corridor standards. FRA has a standard called sealed corridor, and they have mandated that we build to sealed corridor standards, and we have. That includes vehicle presence detection. That means that if the car is blocked on the crossing and the approaching train, it's a radar system. It detects a car or something blocked on the crossing. It signals the train. It's an automatic stop for that train. And if there's a signal breakdown, gates are malfunctioning. We've all seen that from time to time. The train is automatically notified. That's an automatic stop for the train, and somebody is sent out to fix it. So the safety issues of, I think that you can never
guarantee that a passenger train going this way and a freight train going this way carrying LNG and everything else that they carry will never have a problem, and the residents around it will be free, will be okay. I could say, hey, we're safe. Right?
So, by the way, LNG is not being transported up here, but you can't ask me to answer a question like that, ma'am. It's
a concern. I'm a resident. I've got other residents.
It is. These trains are operating safely and will continue to operate safely.
So you can't really answer my question.
These trains have been running for 125 years without those kind of incidents.
Oh, I thought okay.
The freight train.
Yeah. Okay, I've read some reports. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. And you're not building anything to help the residents buffer the noise from 52, 62 trains a day either.
I don't think you're going to have a noise problem for that. You don't really, there's the decibel level of a passing passenger train is very, very low. The vibration you won't feel at all.
Okay.
A horn is why we're doing quiet zones. Yes, ma'am.
I have an article here that was written in June. It said, in a disclosure form filed with the state, Virgin Trains stated that ridership in 2018 was half of what it had predicted, and that the company lost $87 million in the first 9 months. I beg to differ with you about that northern corridor. That's part of Amtrak, which Amtrak is not profitable. There are no profitable trains in the United States of America.
I've been in this business a long time, ma'am. I know the facts.
So with that said, you do a lot of planning, and you seem to be rather intelligent people. What is your exit strategy when it doesn't work?
We don't have an exit strategy. We are going to make it work, ma'am. Thank you.
That's not a good business model. You need an exit strategy. Every business has an exit strategy when it does not work. What is yours? Taxpayers. And who will be running on those lines when Brightline does not run? Will we be subsidizing that when it doesn't work? Taxpayers. Taxpayers are going to have to pay for the crossings. Can you include the crossings in your proposals?
I
for our
can't
safety?
imagine why you think the taxpayers are going to, the state of Florida is going to move in on private property and take over a business.
Because every
Tell me
other
when
railway
that
in the
happens.
whole world, it has almost bankrupted countries, these passenger trains. Italy and Spain are two examples of countries that have had to bleed their residents, the people in their country, to support their government-run trains.
Italo is a private train in Italy that makes money.
Well, right. My other question is more of a quality of life. Do any of you live in Jupiter? No, not us. We live in Jupiter. Do any of you live in Jupiter?
No, ma'am.
No. Have you spent time in Jupiter?
Absolutely.
Have you ridden your bike in Riverbend Park? Have you paddled on the Loxahatchee River? Have you sat out and had dinner out there? Have you tried to sleep in your house at night in Jonathan's Landing with trains coming by? I bought my house 4 years ago. The first night I was startled out of bed. I spent $20,000 on impact windows to shut the noise of the trains. We don't want you here. That's the bottom line. We don't need you here. I don't need a train to go party. I don't need a train to go to Fort Pierce. I don't need a train to go to work. They don't work. You are the only people benefiting from it, not us.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I have a couple questions. This is question and answer for the engineer and for you, because vehicle presence detection, positive train control, you haven't mentioned remote health monitoring, but I'm just wondering, the engineer mentioned that when Phase 2 is built, there will be vehicle presence detection and there will be positive train control. And you have mentioned that you are willing to go the extra mile. But can you answer this? Right now in Phase 1, do you have vehicle presence detection? Do you have positive train control operating? Because they are, as you know, FRA and federally government mandated. So are you using those now?
Positive train control is operating on certain sections of Phase 1. It is being installed section by section. The deadline to have it installed is end of 2020, and so it will be obviously installed by then
Phase
completely.
1.
Yes.
And then before the first train leaves for Phase 2, will you have vehicle presence detection and positive train control in place?
Yes, sort of the mandate says every
You
train
must have it in place.
by 10 of 2020, so
Right,
we
and
will
can
be.
you tell me, of the 34 deaths that have occurred in the last 20 months on Phase 1, how many might have been prevented by having vehicle presence detection and positive train control?
70% of the fatalities on our rail.
I've heard that from you. You had told me once years ago, remember, I've been with you here since 2013 fighting this. You told me once that any accident on the rails, you all would deem a suicide.
No, I never said.
Yes, you
I
did,
have never
sir.
said that.
Yes, you did.
We have incidents where people try to beat the train by going
Right.
around the gate.
Okay, but
They
you
are
were-
in the crossing, the cars have been hit.
But could vehicle presence detection have
Now,
slowed the train down and prevented those deaths?
When the gate is down and you decide to beat the train, the vehicle presence detection would detect that, the train would slow down, but at that point, it's pretty close.
Well, where I live, which is North St. Lucie County, we often have problems with our crossing gates. Even though you call this high-tech, higher-speed rail, we were recently told that we could expect, yes, we will have, when we have lightning storms, there will still be problems, and it would be up to us to provide someone in our own little area, our own little town of 600, to stand at our 7 crossings to make sure they were safe. This doesn't sound like high tech, does it? It sounds like before Henry Flagler even got his train through. So all I am asking is that do everything you can in Phase 1 to prevent any more accidents, and before you move on to Phase 2, please,
please think about not just your passengers. Your quote was the safety perspective of the passengers. What about our safety perspective? What about us? We live here. We have many visitors here. What about our vehicles? Keep everything as safe as possible, please.
That's our intention, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm from the same town she's from. Ann and I have been fighting and been at your meetings since 2013, and you've made several promises. I'm here tonight to ask you about closed corridor so that our citizens who have lived long before Flagler brought the train over, because we had one of the first stations in St. Lucie Village that Flagler built, but we were there before he was. So we have been living a life, I would say we're interrupted every now and then by the train. Now we're going to have 32 trains going. We need safety. Safety first, because we have kids, we have only one way to go into our residence and the same way to go out. You have not. What are you doing for a closed corridor, and what are you doing to prevent loss of lives?
Thank you. Ma'am, safety first is our first priority. And we haven't been reconstructing in your neighborhood, but we will, and all those crossings, the other lady talked about crossings malfunctioning, will be rebuilt with all new equipment.
Yes, and the cost to us. The last time that you fixed one of our tracks, we had to pay $90,000. The budget, and I'm on the budget committee in St. Lucie Village, is $180,000. And we paid $90,000, this is back 5 years ago, to you all, not to you, no, FEC, to rebuild our crossing. So now, 7 or 8 years from now, how much is it going to cost for us to have to take care of each crossing? And we have 7 crossings. And so this is cost to us taxpayers. I can't go to Tallahassee and ask them for money to my village to help pay for this, because they're going to say boo-boo. I'm fighting this all the way to the end, and I hope that you will never get across to our area. Thank you.
Before you talked about it's up to the towns to ask for the quiet zone. If the town asks for the quiet zone and these extra measures need to be implemented, does your company pay to implement any of these additional safety measures?
We're paying for 100% for these additional safety measures.
The additional ones if they request the quiet zone?
We're paying for 100% of that.
2, can the trains be, I heard that the trains are going to go 100, 110 miles an hour in this area. Can the trains go slower through the population centers?
The speed rating by the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, through this area and all the way to Cocoa, pardon me, is 110 maximum speed. We're not going that fast everywhere. As a matter of fact, as we're approaching the Loxahatchee River Bridge, we're slowing down. I think our speed over the bridge is somewhere between 50 and 60 miles per hour.
Okay, so say from West Palm Beach up to the Loxahatchee Bridge, maybe Palm Beach County, Jupiter, what speed are you expecting in that time, in that location?
All I can tell you is our top speed rating is 110. There will be some areas where we're going 110. I don't have a track chart to tell you our speed. It varies because of curvature and other things along the corridor. Average speed between West Palm, actually now between Miami and Cocoa, will be 80 miles per hour. That will be the average speed.
Will it slow down when you're going through the crossings?
Not where we're going 110 miles per hour.
You just mentioned about that, I guess the points on the track, you have, I guess, a scale of where you would do the speeds. Is that available to the public?
I don't know. I don't know.
You mentioned about the having the right of way here, and that's why this is more cost effective than building new tracks, say along the interstate. There's the Western Spur, I guess it's the CSX line. Do you have right-of-way there, or would that be an additional cost to use that line?
Well, if CSX owns that line, and it's like private property, and it's like, in fact, CSX, when some people suggested we move off our corridor onto CSX, because, in West Palm Beach, the two railroads are about a mile apart. So folks were suggesting we get off our corridor, take CSX up to Orlando. CSX immediately put out a statement, said, we are not interested in having All Aboard Florida at the time, Brightline, on our tracks. It's our tracks. They already have Amtrak on their tracks. They're not willing to have any others. We would have to pay them for access to the track, but they have to be a willing seller. It's like if you're Walmart and Target comes to you and said, I'd like an aisle in your store to sell my stuff, do you think Walmart's going to let them do that? It's the same thing. So you're talking about private property. It's not that we can decide, or the state or anybody can decide, we will run here instead of there. It is a private business on private property that is zoned to be a railroad that has been there for a long, long time. It used to run passenger rail there for 70 years. Now it's going to be a little faster. The safety technology is much different now than it was then. This is not the only railroad in the country that runs that grade at those speeds. Between Chicago and Detroit, they run at those speeds. They're building those speeds right now between St. Louis and Chicago. So this is not an experiment. This is something that is doable. You just have to make sure it's safe. Some lady mentioned build the road over the tracks. That's a great idea. Wherever we can do that, I think that should be done. It can't be done in the middle of urban areas because you're going to take out properties nearby when you try to bridge over a track. But that's a program that Florida DOT has had in place for many, many years, that they do surveys of where they could do grade separation and build roads over the tracks. It's more difficult in the urban areas for sure.
Okay, and one more question. The crossing fatalities that occurred South County, Broward County, when you studied them, besides the ones that are suicide, what have you learned from studying those accidents, and what new and improved safety mechanisms are you implementing because of what you learned from those studies?
Other than suicide, the major problem is people trying to beat the train. We have never had one incident on our railroad that has been, or a fatality, that is a result of failed equipment, signal equipment, or any of our equipment. It is somebody trying to beat the train, whether it's a pedestrian running under the gate or a car trying to drive around the gate. What we learned is, in fact, we're doing this in phase one, is where can we beef up that security and put more gates to keep you from going around the gates. That's actually what we are doing up here because of the higher speeds. Jennifer showed you what we call quad gates. If you have 4 gates, 2 here, 2 there, you're not going to be able to go around the gates. So we're upgrading more of those intersections, more of those crossings, with either an extra gate or a median down the center line, and we're experimenting with some other technology in phase one to try and warn people that they're in the danger zone and you need to stop here, or ways to keep them from going around the gate. That is the major reason why people lose their lives, or at least are in an accident. We've had our fair share of those, more than our fair share of those, and suicide is another issue. We are now beginning working with a suicide organization here in Palm Beach County, where we can partner with them to do some suicide outreach and prevention and see how we can address that problem. It's a national issue. More than 300 people a year kill themselves by jumping in front of a train across this nation, and so it is something that is unfortunate that it's happening not just on our railroad, but on Tri-Rail, CSX, Amtrak, happening all over the state.
You said there's a new technology that's required to be implemented now, a PTI? PTC. If, I guess, the car triggers this PTC warning and the train is alerted of it, how far away from the crossing does the train receive this warning, and so how far of a distance they have to be able to stop before the intersection?
So positive train control is mandated by Congress to prevent train-to-train collisions and train-to-vehicular collisions. Yes, I can. So, as I was saying, positive train control was mandated by Congress to prevent train-to-train collisions primarily, but also train-to-vehicle collisions and train-to-pedestrian collisions. So it depends on the proximity of the train to the crossing when the car is detected, and it also depends on the speed. But what will happen is it will automatically detect the vehicle And when it does, the wayside will communicate with the back office, which will communicate with the locomotive and tell the locomotive to slow down. So it will automatically engage the brakes, whether the engineer sees the vehicle or whether he does not see the vehicle, it will engage the braking system.
Is it a warning for the conductor who would then need to make the brake, or is it an automatic brake for the train?
So it'll do both. It'll warn the conductor if there's time. If there's not time, then it will automatically brake the train.
Thank you for your time. As you can hear, safety is the #1 concern. And I'd like to address an issue here, the cars versus trains and how safe they are. When you look at the number of passengers and miles traveled, the trains are as much as 10 times more deadly. Florida has the most deadly rail service in the United States. And you need to address this issue with sealed corridors through the entire system. That's what we need to make it safe. Thank you.
I have a couple of things I want to say. Number one, I applaud you for the sign, which is a clock that tells you when the train is going to come and when it's going to go. They have those at traffic lights all throughout Cuba. So when you pull up to a traffic light, it's going to change 5, 4, 3, 2, and then the light changes. So I think that's a great plus. As far as suicides, I don't think you're going to, it's very hard to prevent a suicide. If someone's going to try to kill themselves in front of a train, unless we get Donald Trump to build the wall and wall out the area so the trains, people can't get to the trains, that's not going to happen. But my concern is our young drivers, okay? When you have 2 trains go by, and I'm not complaining, I'm just making a fact, 2 trains go by, all right, at the same time. The crossing thing is down. The first train goes by, and the gate stays down. Now the young driver thinks that he could go, and it's just taking too long. So what they do, I was a driver ed teacher for 30 years in New York, what they do is they go around the gate, and they get smashed by the train coming in the opposite direction. Okay? So I think you should have signage that says 2 tracks, 2 trains. Or something similar to warn the driver that it's just not 1 train going by, and the reason the gate's down is because the train's going to come the other way.
We're looking at that's a great suggestion, and we're looking at technology to do just that.
Thank you.
Hi, I want to thank you also for being here and allowing us to ask questions. I know it's been a little bit hostile. I had some questions. You talked about you're looking forward to servicing the Jupiter community and this area, but I'm a little confused because I don't see any stops in this area. So I feel like we're taking we're bearing all of the impact without any benefit. And I'm a little confused by that because it's impacting our waterways and all of our small town coastal communities. And I'm not familiar enough with the Brightline track that goes down, but I don't think the track from West Palm down to Miami is going through all of these tiny little towns through to Cuesta, to Jupiter, Hobe Sound, and all of these communities. So I'm a little confused if there are plans to add stops so we can access it, because at this point it doesn't make sense for us to drive 30 or 40 minutes south to West Palm to get on a train to Orlando.
Sure, great question. A lot of people are driving to West Palm to get on the train from here. We've checked the ridership numbers from this area, and it's rather significant. So in terms of additional stations, we want to grow the business. We don't want to become a commuter rail, so it'll be limited. We're not going to do stops, frequency of stops or locals where we stop as much as, say, a tri-rail does. But think about it this way. We're a private company trying to build a business. We can't build it all at once. When the interstate system was built or the turnpike was built, not every exit you see today was there when they first built it. Exits are added as the market demanded, as population growth demanded, but as the state could afford it. It's the same thing with us. We want to build the train. The terminus is in Orlando. We are looking at several areas in between where we can add stations. We've been in negotiation with the city of Boca to have a station, town of Aventura in North Miami-Dade County. We are looking at stops in the Treasure Coast, Stewart, Fort Pierce, Vero. There's all areas we could put stations. We're already looking at Brevard County where we might drop a station in, but it has to come as we're able to do that financially and as the market demands. We also want to extend to Tampa and looking at other areas as well.
Okay, and I have one more question. I know that Jupiter is in the, whatever that phase was called, 4B or 4A, the test track, but you have Tequesta and Martin County, but Tequesta is in Palm Beach and Martin County. So I'm wondering, it didn't have that stop on there that's at Tequesta Drive and Old Dixie Highway. It had Riverside Drive, but that's still Palm Beach County. So I'm wondering if that's still in the test track phase or if that is lumped in with Martin County.
I don't know, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if I can answer that specifically. We're still looking at the end limits of our test track. It sounds like a wishy-washy answer, but part of it is the track distance and part of it is where the signals and controls tie back in. So the northern end of that is a little bit fuzzy right now until we get that.
Okay, and I'm assuming that you guys are going to do that timing because if there's construction on both of those, people in the village of Tequesta cannot get out of that neighborhood or out of that area without doing like a 10-mile reroute.
So when we do a crossing, we are required to not close adjacent crossings. So unless there is some extenuating circumstance that demands it, we will not close adjacent crossings. For the most part, we'll use the next one as a detour, but we will work with the communities because it doesn't make sense to detour a whole bunch of traffic if the adjacent crossing is small and can't handle it. So we will choose not to close adjacent crossings to avoid that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Besides the fact that we're going to have this now high-speed railway coming through our small town 30 sometimes a day, can you explain to me why, I know that the end result is to go to Jacksonville, excuse me. Orlando and then Jacksonville is really the end result of the East Coast Railway in Florida. Can you explain to me why I would want to ride a train to cities that don't have public transportation systems? Like I know West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, everything kind of conglomerated together. But if I were to ride the train from West Palm to Jacksonville or Orlando, what do I do then? What I'm asking is there really going to be that much need for the train to go from West Palm to Orlando during the week?
Well,
30 times
you're
a day.
thinking of your experience, but a lot of people do make that travel. There's a lot of business travel. There's some leisure travel. Ma'am, it's a market that we believe we can capture. In Orlando, we're going into an intermodal center that will have a commuter rail that goes through downtown. What solved the last mile problem with a business like ours is Lyft and Uber. That is what people are doing in Miami. We're right next to the Metro Rail in Miami and the Metro Mover, but people are getting off and using Lyft and Uber as well.
That's actually a good point because my husband's coworker lives in Miami, uses Brightline to come up here, and then Uber. He spends probably like $350 a week just getting back and forth to work. So once we actually get to these cities, there's no public transportation system for us to use there. So what's the point of this high-speed railway to be going back and forth 30 times a day? Listen, on the weekends, families trying to go to Disney, okay, fine. But during the week, is that really necessary? And actually, that's a good point because Richard Branson owns Virgin Cruise Ships.
Florida is the most visited city in the nation. Orlando is the most visited city in America. Tourism is big business. It's not your experience, I get it, but people are doing this travel.
I make my living on tourism. So I'm pretty familiar with certain times of the year, during season, you have a lot of people coming down here. But Monday through Friday, they're working, and especially in summertime, there's no one down here.
I appreciate your perspective. We've done a lot of market studies. We believe that our business plan will work, and that's what we're striving to do.
Okay, we'll see.
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that you're going to start right off with 16 trips a day in each direction. I mean, it's not going to be based on the demand. Is that correct? That it's going to, as soon as you start taking passengers, are you kind of going to grow into your schedule based on the demand.
We grow into it. For instance, in Miami, when we started the Fort Lauderdale to West Palm Beach and then Miami to West Palm Beach, we started with about 8 trains a day. Then we ramped up to 10, 12, I may have the numbers slightly wrong, but slowly ramped up to 16. And then we were able to adjust the schedule where we see that it's not much ridership in a certain time of day. We cut those trains out. And we moved to other times of the day where is ridership. We have, and we're different than other trains, especially Amtrak, where we have a very aggressive marketing department. We do partnerships with all kinds of entities. For instance, here in Palm Beach County, you can take the Miami Heat train down to see the Miami Heat if you're a basketball fan, and that train's going to be waiting for you 30 minutes after the last buzzer. We call it the buzzer beater train. That's a deal we made with Miami Heat. We have the same thing with the Marlins. We have arrangements with the Broward Performing Arts Center where people want to go see plays there. There's a train to accommodate that. There was a big rock festival of some kind in Miami during the season in the spring called Ultra Fest or something, all-night music and the downtown park. We ran a train at 3 in the morning to make sure those people get home, and we filled it. So we have the flexibility to operate trains when the market is there, when the demand is there.
All right, that's a very good thing that you're doing that and you're responding to the actual demand. One thing I'd like to point out is we have an inverse relationship here with your satisfaction of your customers and the inconvenience on the residents. So as you try to satisfy your customers with more trips and everything, you are making a bigger inconvenience on us as far as closing off the river access, the road access. The more trips you make, and if there's any way you could look into the future and add cars to the train rather than add trips, add cars, not trips.
All I
think
will
that would help
say is
things.
these same concerns have been voiced since the day we started, including in South Florida. We've been running for 20 months. Most people down there will tell you that it is not an inconvenience. There is no inconvenience. And a lot of people say, I wonder how we got along without this train. And I think that's what's going to happen here and all the way to Orlando. People are going to find out it's an important component for travel option, an alternative travel in the state. We're running a different kind of business. We're very hospitality focused. We just don't operate a train, but we have a very hospitality focus on our business model where you are treated kind of like you are when you go to Disney. And that's a draw. People are drawn to it. And so we're very bullish on our ability to bring a very desirable product to the state of Florida, and the first state in the nation to do this.
All right, I think at this point, I guess we could hope for the best, but we're expecting the worst. So.
Trust me, sir, it's not going to be that way. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my question is, who owns Brightline?
Brightline is its holding company. Its parent company is Florida East Coast Industries, and the parent company of Florida East Coast Industries is Fortress Investment Group, New York City.
And is there any foreign component to the ownership of Brightline?
No, not directly to Brightline.
Not directly.
There's an indirect foreign investment in Fortress, not in their transportation investment side, but in another side of the company, their brokerage area. But there's no foreign investment in our, well, unless you count Richard Branson.
My other question is, will Brightline be running freight?
No,
Or any subsidiary of it?
no. We're not in the freight business. We're in the passenger business. Leave that to the Florida East Coast Railway.
My final comment is, this is hardly an urban area. We are very small towns. We don't want trains hurtling through our small communities at 120 plus miles an hour.
Yes, sir.
As someone who was skeptical about the Brightline, I have to say that I have witnessed firsthand Brightline working in the city of West Palm Beach. And I say that because, ma'am, please. I say that because my job was to take complaints from citizens of the city of West Palm Beach on a daily basis complaining about the train horns. Since Brightline has been instituted in the city, we've gone from about 100 to 120 complaints per week to 0 because of the noise control. Now, I would suggest that when you come to places like this, I don't know how many people here have ridden on Brightline. I have. It is truly a first-class train. I tell you because my son, who lives in Jupiter, he works in Palm Beach Gardens, he's in the banking industry, and he would have to go down to Miami, sometimes twice a week, would take him 2.5 hours each way. He's getting on Brightline now. It takes him 1 hour to his office in downtown Miami and 1 hour back. If you build it, it will be used. And the safety is the most important thing. My office is right across the street from Banyan and Dix and Quadrille. The issue with the people, with the safety, is it's stupidity. I hate to say this. It is absolutely stupid because you have four lines, and people when it goes up, when the lines go up, they go up and they get right in between the 4 lines, the 4 lanes, and then another train comes, and then you hear the horn blows because they have to blow it for safety reasons. Right. And at that time, the train goes like not even 2 miles per hour. It's going really slow, really slow. And then you have the people the barriers are down, and they go underneath the barrier. Yeah. So, I mean, it's education, and I am a proponent of this. We need to get more cars out of the road. We're getting too congested in South Florida, and it's getting worse, and it's not going to get any better. We need this. We need this. It might be an inconvenience for those that own boats, but you know, you have to work around the schedule. That is all I can say.
Thank you. We have 2. We're going to just do the last 2. You do 2 folks, and then we're done. Okay. Yes, sir.
She was first.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to thank you for your investment in infrastructure in our country. We probably have, for a very developed nation and wealthy nation, we have the worst infrastructure right now that practically exists on the planet. And a lot of people here tonight seem to have forgotten that just 6 weeks ago, we had a Category 5 bullseye right on Jupiter. There'd be nothing here today if the Bahamas had not taken the brunt of that. And I'd like to thank you for, helping to take some carbon out of the air, because that is our future. We have to work at providing a better future for our children and our grandchildren. And
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for having this tonight. My question is, since you're going to be adding a second track, as you do that, are you going to do anything to help with the vibration that especially the freight trains cause? Because it seems like you're packing the freight trains at night, and it does seem to cause a lot of vibration and noise. It'd be nice if something could be done with that.
Yeah, so as Jennifer mentioned in her presentation, we will be upgrading the existing tracks from Class 4 to Class 6. That will make the existing track smoother. There will be flatter curves. The vertical curves will be also flatter, so there will be less vibration just in that alone. We'll be resurfacing those tracks. The tolerances will be a lot tighter. What I will say is that there is nothing that will be done. The FEC Railroad is responsible for maintaining their consist, their rail cars and their locomotives. So sometimes you get the vibration out of a bad brake journal or a flat wheel if it sat too long, or if he locked up his wheels and put a flat spot on the wheel. So that's something that they will continually have to maintain on their existing system and their existing consist. And they will be diligent about that, because in order to maintain Class 6 standards, you can't have bad odor cars running on it. So I would say that the vibration of the existing system is going to get, it's always going to get better.
And I will add to that vibration from a passenger train is negligible compared to a freight train. And I like to compare it to a 18-wheeler versus a Toyota. There's no comparison. Want to thank you very much, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for inviting us here today. Appreciate it very much. And Appreciate you folks who've stayed for the whole time and opportunity to answer your questions. You have our contact information. Glad to hear from you, and I'll stick around if anybody wants to chat.